Julian Sterling slipped into the gallery storage room like a man escaping a fire. His collar was too tight. His mother's voice still crawled along his skin. "The Van Cess are here, Julian, don't embarrass me," and the champagne in his hand had gone warm from gripping it too long. He set it down on a work table and pressed his palms against the surface, breathing in, out. The rhythm of control. He was not alone. A woman stood before an easel, a Hopper study half revealed beneath a dust cloth. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the painting the way someone looks at a person who might speak. "You're supposed to be in the main room." Her voice was low, unhurried. "I heard your mother. She's looking for you." Julian's breath caught. "How did you?" "I know the way that voice makes people move." She glanced at him over her shoulder. Brown hair, simple dress, nothing performative about her. "You ran. Most people run from you. You're the one who runs from them." He should have left. He should have made an excuse, gone back to the gala, endured another hour of his mother's orchestration. But something about the stillness of this woman, the way she occupied space without demanding attention, held him in place. "Who are you?" he asked. "Lumi." She turned back to the Hopper. "I restore paintings. Tonight I'm cataloging acquisitions. Until your mother decided I was a useful prop." He winced. "I'm sorry about that." "She does that, she uses people. It's a reflex." An interesting choice of word. Reflex. Like she can't help herself. She wasn't accusing him. She was observing, the same way she observed the painting. Julian found himself stepping closer, drawn in despite every instinct that told him to maintain distance. "What makes you say that?" "Because you said it like someone who's used to making excuses for her." She finally turned to face him fully, and he saw her eyes, dark honey, warm, utterly unreadable. "But you also said it with shame." That's the interesting part. Something shifted in Julian's chest. A crack in the armor he'd been wearing for as long as he could remember. He opened his mouth to respond, to deflect, to make a joke, to do anything except stay exposed, but the words came out honest instead. "The only way I can survive her is to know what she's going to do before she does it. But I don't even know my own moves anymore." "Not really." Lumi's expression didn't change, but something in her gaze softened. "The Hopper," she said, gesturing to the study. "What do you see when you look at it?" He blinked at the shift in topic. I'm not an art person. I just came in here to get away." "You came in here because something about this room felt safer than the one you left. And you're standing in front of a painting that's been hidden for decades. So you're either drawn to hidden things, or you're looking for something that hasn't been fully seen yet." Julian stared at her. "That's not a normal answer," he said slowly. "That's not how people talk at these events." "I'm not at these events. I'm in the storage room with a painting." She tilted her head, studying him. "You're not here either. You're just hiding in plain sight." His phone buzzed in his pocket. His mother, no doubt, checking on her investment. He didn't reach for it. "What's your story?" he asked. "My story? The one that made you this good at reading people." Lumi was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, soft and low. "I had parents who were too busy to notice me. So I learned to notice everyone else. It was easier than asking to be seen myself." She said it without self-pity, like she was describing someone else's life. "I'm not good at this because I'm special. I'm good at it because I've been practicing since I was 6 years old." Julian felt something in his chest shift again. That's the most honest thing anyone has said to me all night. Give it a minute. You'll probably hear more. She gestured at the hopper. This painting? It's been waiting in storage for 12 years. No one wanted to look at it long enough to understand what it was trying to say. Until I started the restoration, I didn't either. She reached out, her fingers hovering just above the canvas. The woman in this study, she's in a theater lobby. She's waiting. But she's not waiting for someone to arrive. She's waiting for someone who never will. That way, she never has to face what happens if they actually show up. Julian's throat went tight. Why would anyone do that? Because hoping for something is dangerous. If you never let yourself need anything, you never have to feel the absence when it leaves. She dropped her hand and turned to face him fully. You understand that better than most people, I think. He couldn't breathe. How do you know that? I don't know anything. I just look. Her voice was gentle, not a weapon. You're not a hard read, Julian. You're just very good at convincing people you're not feeling anything. He opened his mouth to deny it, but what came out was, I've been doing this so long I don't know how to stop. Lumi smiled then, a small private thing that made her face entirely different. That's the first step, she said. Knowing you don't know. The storage room was quiet except for the hum of the climate control and the distant murmur of the party beyond the walls. The moonlight from the high window mixed with the warm amber of the work lamp, casting their shadows long and intertwined. You're staying, aren't you? Julian said. Not leaving. Not going back out there. I'm going to stay with the hopper for a while. There's a Caravaggio I've been arguing with too, but he can wait. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a simple card, no business logo, just an email address in elegant script. If you want to talk about the painting later. Or anything else. Julian took the card and read the address. This isn't your gallery contact. This is the one I actually check. She tucked her hands back into her jacket pockets. I'm not always in the building. And I don't always want to be found. But you can find me. If you want. He didn't know what to say. He'd spent his entire life in negotiations, always knowing the right words, always managing expectations. Now he just nodded, slipped the card into his inner pocket, and walked to the door. At the threshold, he turned back. Lumi. Yes? I'm going to write you an email. Tonight. I don't even know what I'll say. But I'm going to write it. She nodded once, already turning back to the hopper. I'll be here. The words followed him out of the storage room, down the corridor, and back into the gold-lit noise of the gala. His mother found him immediately, her hand settling on his arm like a trap. There you are. Eleanor Vance has been asking about you. Don't you think you've been rude enough for one evening? Julian looked at her and said, I need to go home. What? I have a headache. It's been a long night. He was already walking toward the exit. Tell Eleanor I'm sorry. Tell her I wasn't feeling well. Julian Sterling, you come back here this instant. He didn't turn around. 47 minutes later, he sat in his penthouse with a glass of whiskey he didn't want and the card in his hand. The Manhattan skyline glittered beyond his windows, endless and indifferent. He pulled out his phone and began typing. To Lumi from Julian subject, thank you. I was raised to believe that people only do things for others because they want something in return. I don't think I've ever met someone who just saw things the way you do, without wanting to use what they saw. I have an essay on Hopper's negative space. It's old, and I read it in a phase of my life when I was trying to understand why solitude felt safer than connection. I thought you might appreciate it. Thank you for tonight. For the storage room. For not making me perform. Julian he hit send before he could second-guess himself, then set the phone down on the table. The reply came 24 minutes later. To Julian from Lumi subject, thank you, it's 2:17 a.m. I'm still in the gallery, because I'm the only person who can work at this hour without the insurance people having a collective stroke. The Caravaggio is being difficult. He's refusing to reveal his secrets. I read the essay. Twice. You've been thinking about solitude for a long time, not because you chose it, but because you were told it was the only safe option. That's what I'm most curious about. I thought you might appreciate this link. It's a jazz version of I'm a Fool to Want You. It makes the hopper feel different. More like a choice than a sentence. Good night, Julian. Or good morning, depending on how you're counting. Lumi he clicked the link and listened to the song, standing at his window as the city hummed below. The jazz was quiet and melancholy, the singer's voice curling through the room like smoke. He'd never been a fool for anyone. He'd always been too careful, too aware of the cost of wanting. Now he listened to the song twice, then opened his email again. To Lumi from Julian subject, thank you. What if I want to be a fool? What if I'm tired of being careful? The emails became a ritual. Late nights, when the city was quiet and the obligations of daylight had faded. They talked about her work on the Caravaggio, which was slowly revealing hidden figures under centuries of varnish. They talked about his board meetings, the endless negotiations that left him hollow. One night, he wrote, I don't think I've ever told anyone what I actually feel. I don't think I've ever been able to. She replied, You're telling me now. You've been telling me all along. You just had to learn the language first. He read that line so many times that the words lost meaning, then found it again. Another night, she wrote, The only way to restore a painting is to accept that the damage is part of its history. You don't erase the damage. You make it part of the story. That's what makes it beautiful again. He sat in his office, surrounded by the evidence of his life, the documents, the calls, the demands, and typed back, What do you do when the damage is all you've ever known? You find someone who sees the original intention, she wrote. And you let them remind you what you were supposed to look like. He didn't expect to see her at the gala. But there she was, in a dress the color of midnight, standing by a window and looking out at the East River as if she'd been there for years. Julian crossed the room before he could think about it. You came, he said. Then, embarrassed, I didn't know you'd be here. Lumi turned to him, and her smile was exactly as he remembered. Your mother is very persistent. And very persuasive. I'm starting to understand why you're so good at being cornered. She cornered you? She asked me to come. Said the board was very impressed with my work on the museum restoration. A pause. Also, she mentioned you'd be here. But I think that part was accidental. Julian felt his face flush. She's trying to manage me. She does that. I know. You mentioned. Lumi tilted her head, studying him. She's also the one who'll never let you stop being the son she needs you to be. That must be exhausting. Before he could answer, a voice cut through the crowd behind them. Julian! I've been looking for you everywhere. His brother Alexander appeared with his usual easy confidence, tuxedo just slightly looser than protocol required. I didn't realize you'd been summoned to this event, Julian said carefully. I wasn't. I came to see the spectacle. Alexander's gaze flicked to Lumi, assessing. You've been holding out on me. Who is this? Lumi, she said before Julian could speak. I'm a restorer at the gallery. Ah, so you're the one he's been spending all his late nights with. Alexander's smile was sharper now. You've turned my brother into someone who actually has things to do after 7 p.m. How did you manage that? Lumi didn't flinch. I listen. That's all. People want to be heard, and most of them never get to be. Not really. And what have you heard from my brother? Julian? Her voice was calm, unhurried. I've heard that he spent his entire life being someone else's project, his mother's, the board's, the family's. And he's exhausted by it. She paused, letting the words land. I've also heard that he's actually quite funny, but he's never sure when it's safe to show it. And I've heard that he'd rather be talking about books than balance sheets, but he's been told that's not what's expected. Alexander's smile had faded. Julian watched his brother's expression shift from amusement to something more complicated. And I've heard that he was taught to see his brother as a burden instead of a brother. That seems like a lot of sadness to carry around. The silence stretched for 3 full seconds. Then Alexander laughed, not his performance laugh, but something surprised out of him despite himself. You're dangerous, he said. I can see why Julian can't stop talking about you. He stepped closer to Lumi. Do you want to dance? I promise I'm less exhausting than my brother. I don't need to be handled with diplomatic gloves. Julian tensed, but Lumi accepted Alexander's hand with a small nod. I'd love to. I imagine you have something to say to me that you can't say in front of your brother. They moved to the dance floor, and Julian watched them turn under the lights. Alexander was bent toward her, more relaxed than Julian had seen him in years. Lumi was listening, her head tilted, her face alight with something that looked like genuine engagement. When the dance ended, Alexander escorted her back to Julian with an expression his brother couldn't read. He settled Lumi's hand back into Julian's elbow, then leaned close. You found someone who actually sees you, Alexander murmured. Don't screw it up. He walked away. Julian turned to Lumi. What did you say to him? She smiled. I asked if it was true that he'd been trying to get your attention his whole life, and you'd been too busy being responsible to notice. That's a heavy thing to say to someone you just met. He needed to hear it. And he needed to hear it from someone who wasn't you. She paused. Also, he's not as scary as you think. He's just lonely. Julian stared at her. How do you do that? Do what? See people so clearly. So fast. Lumi's smile faded slightly. I told you. I had to learn. My parents were too busy for me, so I started paying attention to everyone else. It was safer than hoping they'd notice me. It was the first time she'd said anything about herself that felt like a crack in the armor. Julian reached out and took her hand. I'm noticing you now, he said. She looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. I know. His mother cornered him later, her smile sharp as glass. I understand you spent the evening with the restorer. That's fine, Julian. A little distraction never hurt anyone. But Eleanor Vance is still here, and her father is still crucial to the San Francisco acquisition. The Van Cess were very specific about their expectations. Julian looked at his mother and saw her for what she was, a woman who'd spent her whole life building something, and was terrified that her son would destroy it by wanting something else. Eleanor Vance doesn't want me, Mother. She wants a Sterling. Any Sterling will do. And you think the restorer wants you as a person, not a Sterling? I know she does. How? He thought about the storage room. The hopper. The email exchange at 2 a.m. The way Lumi had looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time, even though she'd never seen him any other way. Because she doesn't want anything from me, he said quietly. She doesn't want my money, my name, my connections. She just wants me to be honest. And I don't know how to be honest with anyone else. His mother's composure cracked, just barely. You'll undo everything I built. Everything your father sacrificed. Did he sacrifice it for me, or did he sacrifice it because you told him to? The silence between them was cold. I'm going home, Julian said. Good night, Mother. He found Lumi on the balcony, the city sprawled before them like a living thing. I've never told anyone the truth about my family before, he said. I've never told anyone anything. She turned to face him. You told me. Because you made it safe. You didn't judge me. You didn't use it against me. You just. I just listened. Yes. They stood in silence for a moment. The river moved below them, dark and patient. Can I ask you something? He said. Anything. Why do you care? About me. About any of this. I'm not someone who's easy to care about. I'm closed off and I don't share things, and I've spent my whole life making sure no one gets close enough to hurt me. What's in it for you? Lumi turned to him, and in the moonlight, her eyes were softer than he'd ever seen them. I don't do things because they're in it for me, Julian. I do them because they're the right thing to do. And the right thing to do tonight is to stay here with you. Because you need someone who sees you. I don't know what that feels like, he admitted. Being seen. Being safe. Being honest. He took a breath. I'm scared of it. I'm scared of how much I want it. So am I. He blinked. You? She nodded slowly. I've been good at not wanting things for a long time. It was safer. But I want you, Julian. And I don't know what to do with that. She was afraid. She was finally afraid. The one thing he'd needed to see all along. We can be afraid together, he said. If you want. Lumi stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of something floral in her hair. I'd like that. Can I kiss you? Julian, I don't want to assume. I don't want to take. I want to ask. That's what you've been teaching me, isn't it? How to ask. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. Yes, she said softly. You can kiss me. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. And when their lips met, it wasn't a performance or a negotiation or a transaction. It was just the two of them, in the dark, finally letting themselves want something. 3 months later, Julian drove Lumi to a place he'd never shown anyone. The carousel was old and peeling, its paint faded by weather and time, but someone had strung lights across its canopy. They glowed in the darkness like captured stars. I found this when I was 12, Julian said, helping her out of the car. My parents were fighting at the hotel across the street. I was trying to escape, and I found this. It's been mine ever since. The only thing I never had to share. Lumi looked up at the lights, her face soft with wonder. It's beautiful. Can I tell you something? He took her hands. When you walked into that storage room, I thought you were going to leave as soon as you realized who I was. Everyone else does that. They see the name, the money, the family, and they start wanting things. But you didn't. I didn't want anything from you, she agreed. I just wanted to see the painting. And you saw me too. That's the first time that's ever happened to me. He paused, gathering himself. I don't know how long this lasts. I don't know if we're going to have to fight my mother every step of the way. I don't know if Alexander will ever really stop testing us. But I know I don't care about any of that as long as you're standing beside me. Lumi squeezed his hands. I'm not going anywhere. You promise? I promise. She pulled him closer. The hopper was wrong, Julian. The woman in the painting wasn't waiting for no one. She was waiting for you to show up and stay. He leaned his forehead against hers. I'm staying. Good. The carousel creaked to life as Julian pulled a hidden switch, and the old mechanical music began to play, wheezing and off-key, but somehow perfect. They climbed onto the wooden horses, laughing as the world spun around them. When the music stopped, Julian pulled Lumi down and kissed her again. This time there was no question, no uncertainty, no fear. Just the two of them, under the lights, with the river whispering its secrets and the city glittering beyond. You wanted to see the original intention, he murmured against her lips. Here I am. Lumi reached up and touched his face. I see you, she said. I've always seen you. 6 months later, the Hopper study was finally unveiled at a public exhibition. Lumi stood beside it, explaining its mysteries to a rapt audience. The loneliness in this painting isn't a tragedy, she said. It's a choice. She chose to wait for someone she knew would never come, because that was safer than risking an arrival she couldn't predict. She looked at Julian, standing at the edge of the crowd. But choices don't have to be permanent. And sometimes waiting isn't about preparing for disappointment. Sometimes waiting is about getting ready for what might actually happen. The audience applauded, but Julian didn't look away from her. Later, after the crowd had dispersed, Lumi found him in his usual spot by the window. You're still in the corner, she said. I am. Does it still feel like a cage? Julian shook his head. No. It feels like a choice. The first choice I've ever made for myself. He took her hand. You gave me that. She smiled, soft and warm. I gave you a door, Julian. You walked through it yourself. They stood in the museum, surrounded by art and history and the weight of everything they'd built together. The hopper glowed in its frame, the woman in the lobby still waiting, still preparing, still ready for what might come. But she wasn't waiting alone. Neither was Julian. He turned to Lumi and said, Thank you. For what? For seeing me. For staying. For everything. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. Thank you for letting me see you. That's the hardest part, you know. Letting someone in. They stood together in the quiet of the museum, the city humming beyond the walls, the art surrounding them like a promise. And for the first time in his life, Julian Sterling felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be.
Subscribe to me for more content.